Today I'll be talking to Sam Thompson of Charles Jeffrey LOVERBOY. Sam is first assistant designer and studio manager at Charles Jeffrey, and we'll be talking about Charles's recent Autumn/Winter 18 show.
Lara, hi.
Hi Sam. So tell me a little bit, how's everyone feeling after the show?
The overall feeling is one of just, I think, contentment.
Yeah, sure.
It's like this sort of deep, profound happiness. I think everyone got a lot out in this collection, emotionally so. And I think just that, having released everything, I think everyone feels just really sort of relaxed, which is really, really nice. And I think quite unusual, actually.
It's interesting that you say it feels like a release, because it was definitely a cathartic show.
Yeah, 100%. For Charles especially, I know that it was really a time to get everything out, both emotionally and in terms of ideas. And I think that shows on the runway because, you know, Charles's collections are always quite eclectic.
Of course.
It was one of the things that drew me to the brand in the first place and made me want to work here. And that's always been something that's been a part of the brand, is that ability to, which you don't see very much, to really be able to just let loose with the ideas and not worry too much about connecting all the dots.
And how did you first get involved with the brand? How did you first meet Charles?
I didn't actually meet Charles on my first day working here, which is quite interesting.
That's quite rare for
yeah,
LOVERBOY.
It is. I started here 10 months ago as an intern. I graduated last year.
Okay.
So I'm not long out of university, really. And I'd followed Charles for a long time. I remember it was actually a SHOWstudio panel I watched.
Oh, yeah.
Where they were discussing Charles's MA show.
Yeah,
and I remember one of the panelists, sort of as Charles's clothes were walking down the catwalk, saying sort of offhandedly, "Oh, I've been told this is one of the brands to watch." So when he put out an Instagram post saying, you know, we need a production intern, sort of got to the point where I was, you know, it was just after Christmas. I think it was February. And I just felt like I needed to be somewhere with people working on something collectively together. And so I applied for it. And, you know, the internship progressed and I really enjoyed myself. I became quite involved with a lot of aspects of the brand very, very quickly.
I'd like to pick up on something you just said there, which is about being involved in collectively with other people. And I think that one of the biggest things that provided that impact was the fact that it was a collectively done show. You know, you had this live band, you know, had a drummer playing there. Not only did you have the Theo Adams Company doing this incredible performance piece at the beginning, but also, you know, we had even SHOWstudio staff were involved filming and dressed in full costume. Tell me a bit about how all of these people come together and what your role is in coordinating them.
Well, it's a serious logistical exercise, basically.
I'm sure.
But, you know, as a brand, we're very lucky to have a designer like Charles because he is brilliant at pulling people together and at you know, almost sometimes very, very last minute, making these incredible things happen. And we work with all these talented people and have worked with, you know, a number of them for several seasons now. People like Gary Card and people like Theo Adams, who are continuously involved from show to show and who can come in really with a week's notice and produce these amazing, amazing things. You know, so often we find that, you know, it all does come together about a week before the show. And, you know, all those little contingent parts that have been, you know, we've been playing around with his ideas. Some of them come up and it's sort of like Charles has an illustration and he'll just say, do that to Gary.
So did that happen with
these
sculptures were made out of bin bags?
Yeah.
And they inflated during the show. And it was quite an incredible moment. These were designed from an illustration, is that correct?
Yeah, so it was an illustration of Charles's, which has been in the studio for some time up on the wall. I think it was actually something that he always sort of wanted to do for set. And it was based off, it was sort of Charles's own rendition of a Klaus Oldenburg happening, something that he'd seen in a book on Klaus. And, you know, sort of really, he was quite taken with it. And so he sort of did his own version. They were sort of shadowy people in the illustration, not really, almost another one of Charles's characters, which slowly becoming more and more integral to his sort of design and art practice.
And talk to me a bit about the characters, because they were such a key part of that show, you know, and when he was explaining it to me before a bit, he was saying, he kept repeating this word, that it could be like a coliseum, and about the way that, you know, people were booing or clapping and they had the Yost look.
Yeah. Those characters, I think, that was really to do with the Klaus Oldenburg happenings, and having something that was sort of a little bit satirical and was really sort of on the edge of what would be acceptable at a fashion show, I think. And obviously, they were all Theo Adams performers, but I think it was really just about having. It was about that sense of validation that Charles talked about, I think, after the show, and we also talked about in the show note, that comes from him reading Velvet Rage, and really, about having grown up gay and being bullied, that constant search for validation. And the performers were there to really be almost the bullies in a way, the characters that are either giving validation or withholding it from different models that were walking down the catwalk, from different looks. So that was really where the Yost looks came into play. Those were the looks that were really receiving the highest sort of praise and the highest validation. But the idea also that, these are they're all fake critics. They're all fake, performers. They're not really real. They're all just sort of a bit hollow. And it's that sense of the hollowness of that validation, because you never really, even when you're given it, you never entirely believe it. You're always searching for something more, something a bit higher.
Well, I did want to ask as well, it felt definitely like, and I knew that the references were a lot about gayness and queer culture, but I was interested that Charles spoke a bit about this kind of slight inception idea and the idea of being a show within a show. And I wondered if as well he wasn't, with these critics, pointing back at the audience a little, looking at the fashion critics sitting and watching and perhaps making some sort of comment on everyone there. What would you say?
I don't think so. It was certainly supposed to be a sort of mock-up of a salon show. And I think we didn't necessarily want critics to see themselves in these performers, I don't think, because I don't think that's true. I think, the reviewers that we've had and the reviewers which Charles has a relationship with, people like Tim Blanks and people like Sarah Moa are actually very, very important to our practice. And, the feedback that they're able to give, we do take on board, and we do think it's incredibly important. But I think it is, more sort of perspective on the industry as a whole, and, how fickle the industry can be and how quickly they can, be, supporting you and be incredibly, kind about the collections, and how quickly that, the spotlight can turn off a designer.
Sure.
We are very aware of the fact that we are having a bit of a moment right now, and the need for us to, and the expectation that we are going to have to keep growing and keep building and keep doing bigger and better and brighter shows. And I think it's really for us about trying to find a way that we can do that, but still be sustainable as a brand and not push ourselves beyond, the limits of what we can and should be doing, if you know what I mean.
Before you can look to doing bigger and better, let's go back for a moment. I think you should be able to relish the success of that show, because it really was quite something. How was the atmosphere during
backstage?
The show? Yeah.
Very calm, actually. It was a real contrast. I watched, because of course as a part of the design team, you never actually get to see the show yourself, which I always think is a bit of a shame. You watch it on TV screens, but you never really get the full idea.
Yeah.
But I remember, during the rehearsal, I got a bit teary. It was because it felt like a very cathartic, emotional moment. But actually backstage, everything was calm. It was very organized. The looks were all ready to go quite early on. And we had the time to really make sure that everything looked as it should.
Yeah.
And of course it was crazy as well. There's crazy makeup going on. All the performers are getting dressed. There's this amazing sort of spectacle, as much backstage as there was out in front. But the general feeling was actually quite relaxed, and it was a sense that really we could enjoy the moment, I think, more than anything else. And I think Charles did, during the show, rather than being stressed out or whatever, he really was able to enjoy it and watch the whole thing and not be stressed out about it.
It's funny, the Charles shows that I've seen before have always, in themselves, in the performative aspect, have always felt incredibly joyful. And not that I would say that this show didn't have that same energy, but I don't think that joy was the emotion that it evoked.
No.
You know, particularly. But I did go backstage after the show, and there you could feel the joy that resonated after the performance.
Absolutely. I don't know. I think in a sense it was joyful. It was still, you know, it was still a celebration. It was just a celebration in a different way. It was perhaps a more sober celebration of everything the brand's about. And I don't think...
But it was entitled Tantrum. And there's this film that we have, called Tantrum. Why do you think that was? And Charles had this wonderful note that we read before that was said something like, you know, when I get angry, I get Scottish.
Yeah, anger is an energy. Yeah, the quote, anger is an energy, which is something that we've had up on the wall in the studio for the entirety of the time that we've been designing the collection. And I think it was really, you know, the anger that Charles has is something that he, I think, discovered reading The Velvet Rage and hearing from that book the reasons behind the way he felt, and having a little bit of anger at society for the way that he realized he was feeling, in a sense, and the way that he'd been caused to feel. But also just that sort of, I guess, you know, that constant ongoing struggle to have to validate yourself to other people, and using that anger not as a sort of negative energy, but as a positive energy, you know, something that you can use to let everything out and be creative and really, really use it. And I think that comes across in the show quite physically, you know, in terms of the things that have been shredded, the things that are a bit DIY, the things that have been put together, look like they've been put together quite quickly. All of that is, you know, us collectively, in a way, throwing everything that we had emotionally at this collection. And I think that's also why we feel so calm and relaxed following it.